We're going to start here momentarily, but I wanted to welcome all of you to the music building, room 818, music building here at Shoreline Community College. My name is Matt Jorgensen, and I'm one of the music and music technology faculty members here at the school at Shoreline Community College. Come on in, front row, guys, front row. So, a couple things. I just want to welcome all of you here. It's exciting because it's like one of our first outward-facing concerts of the year here in the music building. So, I wanted to welcome you and thank you for being a part of it. Because if none of you were here, this would be really awkward. So, it's so nice that you're all here. I also want to thank the Associated Student Government of Shoreline Community College. Do we have any Shoreline students? A few of them here. Your student activity fees are helping to pay for this concert. So we want to thank ASG for funding this. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to play some music. We have some guests from out of town. We're going to talk to them a little bit. How many? Majority high school students, right? High school music students. We all play instruments. Play an instrument? Awesome. So again, I teach both the music and the music technology program. We have some of our faculty here, Doug Reed, Chris, Meg teaches voice, a couple others. Paul Gabrielson plays bass, he teaches bass here. And so what's unique, I think, about Shoreline is we have both music and voice, instrumental music, voice program, music theory as well. But we also have music technology. Behind this wall right here is our recording studio, and actually right now would be a second-year recording class, and so that's why we have the microphone set up, because they are recording this concert. And so if anyone's interested, after the show, we're going to open up the curtains and you can take a brief walk through our recording studio and see kind of the fun stuff that we have at the school. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce two wonderful musicians who are coming through town, finishing up the tour. This is the last show on the tour. Please welcome on trumpet, Mr. Jim Rotondi.
Yeah.
On saxophone, the wonderful Dick Oatts.
Yeah. afternoon, everyone. How y'all doing today? Oh, come on. How's everybody doing today? Who knows the name of that song? Me neither. I can't remember the name of it. I heard it on record a couple days ago. I thought it would be fun to play. So I know Cannonball Adderley recorded it, and we thought we'd start with the blues, and because that's really where everything else in this music rises out of the blues. That is the foundation. So that's where we started. Right now, we're going to continue with an arrangement of a beautiful standard that was arranged by my worthy constituent, the great Dick Oatts. How about it for Dick Oatts?
What was that last one called?
Good. We'll take you on the road with us.
All right. I thought we'd take a quick moment. Let me introduce these guys. We got Paul Gabrielson on bass. Bill Ancho on piano. And a number of us here in the room are high school students. And so I always was honored to have, a chance to talk and learn about, I think, the life story of musicians who, at the time, I was learning. My backstory is I started at Shoreline Community College, went here, and then I went to New York to go to the new school. And I went to New York to go to the new school because the bass player in the band here at Shoreline was like, I'm going to go to New York to go to the new school. Do you want to go too? And I was like, okay. And that was it. And I think maybe, some people out there are wondering what they're going to do afterwards. So I thought, Jim, I'll start with you. What was Jim Rotondi in high school? What were you thinking of musically, and where did you go, and what was your path?
Okay, so I grew up not so far from here in Butte, Montana, and in Butte, Montana, there wasn't much of a musical scene or community or anything like that. So all the jazz that I was exposed to, I sort of found for myself. I had a few records, really important records for me. I remember one of the first jazz trumpet recordings I heard was the Clifford Brown Max Roach Quintet. And all of this was on vinyl back those days. That's how we bought it and listened to it. And so I remember thinking, as soon as I heard it, I said, you know, because if you know the story of Clifford Brown, he's an incredible influence in the jazz trumpet community, but he actually died very young at the age of 25. And so when you consider that, he really had an incredible influence on so very many musicians. And like many others, when I first heard it, I was like, wow, I mean, how could it be that clear? How could it be that perfect? And how come he's not that much older than I am? Or wasn't at the time. And so I just started, at that time, you know, because you asked me sort of what I was thinking and where I was heading. I didn't know where I was heading. I just knew that I was listening to some incredible music, and I started trying to copy it immediately. That's all I did. I was like listening to it. I took it down in the little stereo in my bedroom, and I just tried to play along with it as much as I could. So when I finished high school in Montana, I actually came out to study at the University of Oregon in Eugene, but not with the intention of being a musician, actually. I didn't know what I was gonna do. So I remember very clearly, about 2 years into that study program, I said, you know, all I'm doing is practicing the trumpet. I don't even really go to classes. You know, my dad's sending me money to live on, and I was buying records, you know. And he didn't know that. But, so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is music took me. I didn't choose music. Music sort of chose me. And I remember attending, some years later, I remember attending a workshop by the great teacher and pianist Barry Harris. And someone in that particular workshop asked him the question, well, you know, how do you know how does someone know if music is right for them? And he said, well, if you don't really absolutely have to do it, maybe you should think about something else. And that kind of drove it home for me, because I remember earlier in Oregon, I was just practicing the trumpet. That was all I was thinking about. It was all I was doing, you know. So music is such a beautiful way of spending your life, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure Dick, you would agree with that. And so, you know, I feel like music took me. That's where I was going. I didn't really choose that much. I just practiced.
What about you, Dick? What was your path forward?
My first inspiration was my brother had a trumpet, and so he didn't practice it much, and so I picked it up and I started to mess around with it a little bit, and I got pretty good for a minute, and then I dropped it, put a dent on it. And he said, I want to kill you if you ever touch that again. So that was my inspiration to move to, my father offered me a soprano saxophone to work on. And so I had like a 50-year-old king soprano that just smelled like the high heaven. You know when you open the case and it just smells terrible? It's like, so anyway, I played that for a couple of years, and then he said, if you practice hard and you get good enough, I'll give you my alto, and that was his alto. I got it in 1963 because I practiced hard. And the second inspiration is he used to take me a lot to hear a lot of jazz that was in Des Moines, Iowa, if you can ever believe that. You know, but it was great. So, you know, Basie's band would come in and Ellington's band, so they did a joint concert, you know, with the 2U record.
Oh, the battle, it was...
Yeah, it was so beautiful. And I was such a, like, Johnny Hodges and Duke Ellington were like my biggest heroes, and they just like were stars for me. And so I went up to two guys at the bar, and you know, I was like about 8 years old, and he said, could you just sign this? And it was just a little notepad, and I figured, well, I couldn't get lucky because enough to have my heroes on it, but it turned out to be Duke Ellington and Johnny Hodges. So, and then actually, probably Thad Jones was probably in that band at that time. But just those early inspirations really, I saw the bus leave and I saw all the magic with it inside of it, you know. I said, I want to get on that bus. not knowing how smelly those buses actually are. So I dealt a lot with, but I can't tell you, you know, I'm inspired here today, just seeing you here supporting us in this program and this great music. I mean, it's an inspiration. If you look for it, it's an inspiration every moment. If you just keep your eyes open, your ears especially that way. So, yeah.
Can I ask what role at that time as you were forming, like listening to records? How did you approach listening to records? What did that mean to you at the time?
Well, you know what, I think, you know, when I look at it, and I talked this over with Jim, is that, you know, like a lot of us, you know, a lot of parents buy their kid an instrument, but they don't spend any time with their child listening to that instrument. And to me, that's 100% of it. That inclusion that your parents spend with you, the thing, even going to a record store and finding used records or CDs, that is an important situation in the family. My dad and I did that constantly. We were both alto players, but he just, every time I went down to practice, he'd be right there either playing the piano or playing the bass, and encouraged me to learn this tune and this tune, but it was really a parental enthusiasm that he gave me that really just took it up another notch.
What about you, Jim? I know your mother was a music teacher, piano teacher, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. In my family, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm the youngest, and in our family, it was actually required. It was compulsory to study the piano from the age of 8 until we graduated from high school. It wasn't optional, it was required. And, you know, I have to, when I think back on that, I think, you know, wow, none of my other friends are required to take piano lessons. But that kind of discipline has helped me more than I can say. You know, the piano is like a critically essential component of how I look at music now. And I think if I hadn't had that guidance, I mean, to be required to take lessons, I'm not so sure that's the right way for every family, but what you're saying, Dick, about having your parents involved in your exposure to an instrument, I think that's critically important, you know. So.
My dad took me to see Tony Williams when I was into drums, and my dad, bless his heart, he's like, I'm gonna get front row seats at Jazz Alley at the club. If anyone knows Tony Williams, it was a rather loud experience. I loved it, my dad probably not so much, but God bless him for doing that. But let's play some more music, shall we?
Sure.
What are we doing next?
Hey, let's do Ruth. Okay. So this is a song that I wrote for my mother, the one that we were just talking about. And it is simply called Ruth.
Let's open it up for a couple of questions. Does anyone want to be the first one? It's fun. Yeah.
So this is just to anyone. When you're playing your instrument, what do you strive for, and how do you accomplish that?
Well, I first strive to connect with this and this. And so everything that I would think of harmonically, of any difficulty, it doesn't have that thing first. It doesn't have it for me. So I'm trying to hook up, I'm trying to find different ways rhythmically I can dance with that. So that's the first thing that I want to try to go for. And then the harmony is kind of a distant second. Melody too, of course. Having a game on you know, the melody and knowing the essence of it and knowing how I can use that at any time. If something goes kind of confused up there at any moment because I'm putting too much energy into it or whatever, I'll always have common ground with the melody and the rhythm. So that's what I strive for. Not a bunch of technique and stuff like that. Yeah.
Who else is out? Anybody else got a question?
Good question. Man, that's very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who are you guys' biggest influences? Good question.
Check. Yeah, that's a great question. Influences, in my experience, keep on happening. So I have my early influences and then maybe sort of more recent ones. As I mentioned before, one of my first ones was Clifford Brown, and then as I also mentioned, I was spending money on records when I was supposed to be spending it on something else. So I remember that I used to go in record shops and I would go through the jazz bins and just buy a record if it had a picture of a trumpet on the cover, even if I had no idea who it was. And so, you know, from doing that, I found out about virtually every trumpet player that was popular at that time, like Miles Davis, Art Farmer, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard, Booker Little, Kenny Dorham, Louis Armstrong. The list, I could sort of go through the whole list, you know, but sort of more recently, I find myself listening to different kinds of music. I mean, I've always listened to a variety of music, not just like music in this context. So I've always liked, you know, things like Stevie Wonder and Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire. And more recently, I really like what Snarky Puppy is doing. They're doing some cool stuff. And, you know, Jill Scott, all kinds of things like that. As well as, there was a period when I listened to really almost exclusively classical music, sort of like Ravel and Debussy and Tchaikovsky and stuff like that. So I find that influences that inform this music, like what we just played, come from all over, you know, and I encourage my students to keep their ears wide open, and if somebody says, wow, this is great, check it out. And if somebody says, wow, this really sucks, check it out. You know?
Well, I listen to music that I get, that takes the breath out of me. And so when I hear something, it goes like, I go like that. That means it's a natural thing that I feel for that soloist, or for the style of music, or for this kind of harmony, or I haven't heard it before. And so that's the inspiration I'm constantly seeking, to try to find out what that is and to explore it, and how did my predecessors explore it like that, in the same way. So my father, when he played, he had a beautiful alto sound, and it just, that was the first thing that moved me towards Sonny Stitt, or Charlie Parker, or, you know, Benny Carter, definitely Johnny Hodges. And so I find like-minded spirits like that. And I think that one of my, I guess my favorite experiences is that it's funny, I heard, when I was 13, I heard Dave Sanborn play with a big alto sound. All I had was this little Runyon, you know, like this. It was like a 3-star Runyon. I'm going, oh my God, what is that huge sound he's getting? And I remember, I didn't know, you know, he played Art Pepper plus 11 stuff. It was just like fantastic, but it was like, it just jumped up at me like Paul Desmond jumped at me, like Johnny Hodges jumped at me, Bird. And so those are the things that really like tickle your fancy. So be aware of what does it, like what brings tears to your eyes, what brings excitement, what brings motivation. Like a lot of that was just really key for me, because I was in the middle of Iowa. There's nothing out there but corn, and a lot of it. So I had no choice but to just spend my days fantasizing about, I wonder what those players are thinking about when they were playing Loverman, when Cannonball was playing Loverman. What did Nat think about when he was playing with Cannonball? What did you know? So it just, all these things that you wonder about, and you finally play with guys like Jim and this great, incredible trio, that you find out, wow, some of those things are a reality if you just open up and let yourself, instead of being afraid of it. So, you know, like when I'm afraid, I always go for the rhythm, and that's the thing that keeps me sane. So, yeah.
So,
Anybody else out there?
Yeah. So what is the most beautiful experience you ever had in your career?
The most beautiful experience we ever had in what?
Your career.
In our career.
Yeah.
They've all been so special, you know. But I think, for me, the first time I got a chance, my first night in New York, and I got to play at the Village Vanguard with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis Orchestra. That became like an inspiration for a lifetime, you know. And so, also when I worked with Luther Vandross at Madison Square Garden, that was another one. I'm going, holy cow, I'm playing with Luther Vandross at this venue, and I'm going, oh, amazing. And so those are things I always remember that stand out. But you know, this right here is a valuable experience for me right now. And I'm talking to you about what inspires me. This really inspires me, because I see all of you talented, young and not so young, but talent, and that's what I love. And I know, speaking for Jim, but we love to talk to you musicians on this level. So that's really inspiring.
You know, I have a similar version of that story that Dick has, because I was fortunate when I was a young man to work with the great Ray Charles, and I wasn't expecting it to happen. I tried to make it happen, but I wasn't expecting it to happen. And the beautiful moment that you refer to for me was coming home one night really late, or I should say early in the morning, after going to some jam sessions and whatever, and on my answering machine it was the kind of answering machine with the cassette tape. You all don't even remember any of that stuff. But we used to have these phone answering machines that had little cassette tapes. And so, you know, you could rewind it back and listen to the message, you know, a million times. And I came home with this, yeah, Rotondi, it's Brother Ray. I got your tape. I'm gonna send you a plane ticket. You'll be out in LA next week. And I was like, okay, which one of my friends is doing this to me? Because this is not real. And then, of course, the next day, I made some calls and found out it was real. And also, I erased that tape. So I didn't get to keep that message, which I really wish I had. That's one little regret I have. But that was a fun one.
Any questions over here? Yeah.
I guess this is kind of multiple questions, but I know it's been a while, but how has like COVID and quarantine affected your careers? What are your thoughts on like how music has been affected, and do you have any tips to like encourage our generation since we kind of like?
It's a great question. You want to start?
Sure.
So if you didn't hear it, the question was COVID and how did it affect our lives as musicians, and I guess our lives in other ways. So of course it was a huge drag because the bottom fell out of everything in terms of live performance, and none of us could really see the end of what was going to happen there. You know, when it was going to come back, and how it was going to come back, and how our lives were going to be after. So I know for myself that during COVID, what happened was, like a lot of my musician colleagues, we got really sort of good at making home recordings to contribute to global videos. That's what we all did. We made virtual performances. And that was cool in a way. It wasn't a substitute for live performance. I never thought that it was. But it was really cool to see how the connection can be made halfway around the planet, you know? And I think it connected a lot of us who maybe weren't connected before. And, you know, I hope, knocking on wood, that we're gonna go back to live performance and stay there, but it's nice to know that we can stay connected if it doesn't happen, you know? But, or if another mini COVID or whatever happens, you know?
Well, you know, you think of the first one, coming after World War I, how did they do it? And, I mean, you people in here are a good lesson for what you might teach your kids or your students later on about how to persevere, how to maintain, and how to keep growing, keep your resolve happening as people, and as people who love other people and support one another. And I think, if anything, this has been a great lesson for humanity in that direction, how to keep positive and how to stick up for your friends and your colleagues. And knowing this is just going to be a minor setback to your final, what you want in life. And I think it's easy to give up and it's easy to let go. And it was certainly been, I mean, I was in my mid-60s when this came out. I could have just like said, I think I've had enough. Not a long career, I think. All right, see you later. But then I heard this other, I heard a couple of my students play, and I go, man, he sounds so great, oh my God. You know, then it just kept resurfacing this need to be amongst like-minded people that have strong directions and high ideals to discover. And so I don't want any of you to ever let any setback like this, news or what's coming out, to deter you from your final love and your passion. Because you got too much life to live. So keep after it, embrace it, and respect it. I always think of, you know, when I look at my strength, I felt like I've had 4 children, but I've had actually 5. And the first one was this. I learned how to take care of it. I knew how to change it. I knew how to, you know, embrace it. And when it talks back to me, I knew how to speak to it. You know, I just found that this is my first child, so I had to take care of it, and that's what we're doing with your life and your desire. Think of your desires as your first child that you want to nurture and take care of and grow with. So,
Do one more quick one, then we'll play another tune, yeah?
Okay, so I'm not musically inclined at all. I'm
either one.
here to watch this, but something I learned about are maybe it's just TV and movies, things about jazz and blues. How often, and maybe more people know this than I would, how often can you just get together and without the music sheets or anything, and just play? And just kind of feel it and just know.
We just spent hours in the car all week, all the last 10 days, and that was music to me. You know, talking about other subjects, talking about music, but talking about, you know, anything. I think musicians are the most creative, thinking and talking people ever.
Okay, I was just thinking, like, how hard would it be for the five of you to say, okay, let's do something in this cue, and somebody start, and then just everybody get in there type thing?
Well,
How
the
hard
first tune
is
we
it?
played, that's what we did.
Oh, the first tune, okay.
Yeah, I showed it to Dick 2 minutes before we played it, and that was a blues in B flat, so.
I actually wrote a note about that, and that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, okay, so, you know, this is a great question though, because this is one of my things that I like to talk to students about. And, you know, the thing is, now it's time for me to sound like an old geezer, but when I was a young student, your age student, we didn't have iPads, we did have real books, but we didn't have iPads, and we didn't have, you know, the little things in our phones and whatever. So the method to learn a new tune was to use your ears and try to sort of assimilate it as soon as you could. And now I see at jam sessions, you know all the things you are? Sure, let me get my phone out, you know. And the thing is, it kind of can work, but think about this for a second. If you take out your iPad and you're reading a new tune, you have to read every measure one at a time, right? That's the way reading works. Reading a language, reading music, whatever. So that means, basically, because of the physical sort of shortcoming of that, there's no way that you can step back and think of 8 measures or 16 measures of a tune. But when I play a song, because I come from an era and a sort of a young training, when I was younger, learning that way, I really try to assimilate songs so that I don't have to read them. Sometimes we do have to read them, but I like to, especially for the bass players, the piano players, the guitar players, the rhythm section, I always give my students a challenge, a 5-chorus challenge. Even if it's a new tune, okay, read it, turn the pad over after 5 choruses, and try to play the tune, okay? Because, like I'm saying, if you have it internalized, you can think of 16 measures at a time. If you're thinking about Jerome Kern's All the Things You Are, you know there's a lot of chords in that song, so you're starting in one place, 8 measures later, you're someplace else, 8 measures later, you're someplace completely different. If you're thinking of each chord, well, that's gonna kick you in the butt every time. But if you can step back and say, okay, I know I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna play some phrases I practiced that get me there, then you much more achieve a flow when you're improvising. And to be honest with you, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a relaxed flow where, in fact, we're not thinking about anything. You know, I get that question a lot from students. What are you thinking about when you play? I'm not thinking about anything, but I've earned the right to do it. You know, I've been practicing a long time, and I still practice every day. So that's kind of, if I give you all a little assignment, take the 5-chorus challenge, you know, try to internalize the song.
You know, and also, visually, if you can think of visually doing something a little different, like I envision a ceiling fan with, it's just going around in perfect order, you know, and the last thing I want to do is put my alto up there, make it stop and make it move like that. And so that's the last thing I want to do to the rhythm section. So I'm always trying to think of, how can I dance with that? And that's the first thing I would consider, that you start to think more about. The solo is, you know, you're not really a soloist, you're an accompanist to this. So if you think of yourself, that takes a lot of pressure out of the way of it. And especially when you're playing the melody, that's a good place to experiment on how to flow and listen first. The melody is like the introduction to it all to me. So having game on the melody instead of just learning a lot of to me, devices through chords and harmony and stuff. I think that it's like, you know, when Jim would turn it over to close that aspect off, and it wasn't going to be a pressure or a burden to him. So anyway, you want to try one more thing?
Sure, if you want.
You want to do it, Prince Albert? We'll do Prince Albert.
Sure.
We're going to try to put our money where our mouth is. Well, we all have, well, some of us have kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have 4 of them, but there's always one in that batch that's always the troublemaker. And this guy, as soon as we'd get on the plane, or even before, he would sense the chute, as you go down inside, and he would start screaming. And then he would scream, didn't matter if it was a half-hour flight, hour flight, 6 hour, 8 hour, 9 hour, he'd scream all the way through. I'd go out and buy like earplugs and I had about 50 pair of them. I'd give them around to the people on the plane. It was just excruciating. This is why I'm wearing hearing aids today, is because his screams are so loud that, yeah. But it tested my resolve, but it also tested his resolve about how tenacious he could be in his aspirations as a young individual. So, just dedicated to him, I call it King Henry. He doesn't need anybody. Okay, let's just go.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Rotondi on the trumpet. Big Oatts on the saxophone. Still on piano. Paul and and my name is Matt Jorgensen. Thank you all.
So I know I put on the email out to most of you, so it's almost 5 o'clock, and I want to be mindful of time because some people are out of here. We can do a few more questions because Paul's going to pack up his bass real quick, and those who want to stick around and have a tour through the Shoreline Studios are welcome to do that.
You know, the fact that you all showed up, that's like 79.5% of how you learn and how you grow, and just keep supporting your area, no matter where you live. Support your local art chapter and just keep going after your dream. When I was out in Minneapolis, and this friend of mine that I'd worked with like 35 years ago, he gives me a CD and he says, "Oh, just check out my new alto player. He replaced you. He was really bad, and he wants to come out and do the same thing you did." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He says he wants to sub for you at the Vanguard on Monday night, and he also wants to go to school at Manhattan School of Music where you teach. And I said, "Well," I said, "Well, I can't wait to hear him." So I listened to him, and the guy really just had no game at all. Nothing. I mean, no sound, no time. Everything he did was edgy. He played too many notes that he didn't know what he was doing, how to resolve them, or anything like that. And so I had to call him back, and I said, "Paul, I don't know if this guy's ready. He should study with this guy or this guy or this, maybe this, listen to more of this." And he said, "Well, you really think so?" I said, "Yeah. I think I wanted to save the money that he saved up so hard before he moved out to New York." So he said, "Well, he's going to take it really bad, especially coming from you." And I go, "Uh-oh." So he says, "What do you think, Paul? Maybe I should call him?" He says, "Yeah, I think you should call him." So I said, "Okay, can you give me his number? I'll give him a call." He says, "Well, his number is 914-980-1255. I said, "What do you mean? Paul, that's my number." He says, "No, Oatts, let me give you, I'll keep looking for his number." He was blind and had out of his skull anyway. But he finally gave me the number again. He says, "Yeah, 914-980-1255. I said, "Paul, that's my number." He says, "Oatts, you're still as gullible as you were when you were working with me. That was you on that tape. That was you on that recording." And I just fell to my knees and I said, "Thank God I kept an open mind and kept around artists like you to grow from, especially like Blue Band." So anyway, that's kind of a running in reality.
All right. Once again, here we're coming. Big news. I have to plug to Shoreline, the Associated Student Government. I want to thank them for funding the concert. How about a round for them? And then, Chris Mathakul, our new band director, is here. So some of the band directors, if you want to connect with Chris. And then stick around, we're going to open up the studio, you can take a tour. And thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Come talk to us. We're here, open to answer questions. Thank you all.